Hey there. A classic topic of discussion when it comes to fancy new military technology is the idea of some top secret wonder weapon that the military has stored away in some hidden bunker and will only bring out in the case of World War III. But is that really a thing? Are there CIA black sites with a bunch of Terminators on standby waiting to spring on some poor Chinese conscript? No. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what things the military does keep classified, why they do it, and what might surprise you most, and most importantly, why they don't. So let's get started. Now, I know what you're thinking. Obviously, classified military technology exists, you dumb fuck. And you would be right. We probably still wouldn't know about stealth Blackhawks existing unless one had crashed while taking out bin Laden. The F-117 was so famously secret that most Air Force pilots didn't even think it was possible to build until it was already used in combat. And the entire Oppenheimer movie is just like 90% dialogue on the different characters talking about how the Japanese Atomizer 3000 is a secret. But secret military technology doesn't really work how you think it does. I'm going to be putting all military technology basically into three different categories. The ones we know literally everything about, the ones we know most things about, and the ones we don't know exist until they get used for the first time. So let's start with the things we know everything about. Believe it or not, you can find like 90% of everything there is on the entire military purely based on the public information that they put out themselves. We knew quite literally everything there was to know about the new M10 Booker before it was even officially revealed. The new F-35 engines had public advertisements and train stations before the Air Force even decided to buy them. You can even get a hold of basically every single strategy and field manual ever produced by the military that goes into detail how weapon systems work, what strategies we use to fight people, and step-by-step guides on how to do the dumbest fucking military exercises ever invented by anyone. But wouldn't it be in our best interest to keep this kind of stuff quiet? Aren't we just helping the bad guys by having this information out available for the public to know? The answer to that for the majority of information on strategy, gear, and technology is no. It literally does not matter that it's out there. Will showing how a Javelin works make it easier for Russia to build protection against it? Maybe. Could China try to exploit things by knowing how far a V-22 Osprey can fly? It's possible. Is North Korea going to begin conducting psychological operations based on military TikToks? Well, that one actually, yeah, there's a good chance of that one. But the thing is, it really does not matter if people know this base level of information. How far an Osprey can actually fly on any given day is subject to about 1 million different factors, from the humidity in the air to what the pilot had for breakfast that morning. The tandem warhead on a Javelin is not new technology, and it's pretty well known how it operates. If you're an adversarial nation doing mission planning and you know a bunch of Marines will be flying around in tilt-rotor aircraft, you're not going to spend an hour doing the math to try to find the exact point that they'll have to turn around and get more fuel. Because odds are they're not going to fly that far, even close, and if you just know that they're operating in the area, regardless of how far they can fly, you'll just carry an extra missile to take it down if you want to. Or just, wait for the thing to fall out of the sky on its own. Javelins are almost 30 years old, and basically no part of them hasn't been dissected by some Chinese or Russian tech analysts. And yet, they bitch slap tanks left and right today. Regardless of, say, China is able to reverse engineer the Javelin, even though China has managed to reverse engineer the Javelin, the best way to counter it isn't to methodically go through the targeting computer and figure out how it works and then activate the deep state adrenochrome farms to develop some alien technology. It's to just not have a tank sitting out in the open without infantry cover, which has been the same strategy since World War II. When it comes to putting small unit tactics on the internet, that also does not matter at all. Knowing that if you get attacked by a squad of Americans, they're going to try to flank you is like playing football and having insider knowledge that the offense is going to try to score a touchdown. No shit is the proper response to that. When and where we conduct that flank is what needs to be kept secret, not the fact that we're gonna do one. Plus, like 90% of this stuff is either completely irrelevant, isn't actually used in real life, or for the most part, is completely ignored by the exact people it was intended for in the first place. Having the prone row exercise on YouTube is not a national security risk. I can promise you that one. So ultimately, the vast majority of things are not secret even a little bit, and that does not matter. And it's really just not worth it. Now, why it's not worth it to make everything secret, I'll talk a little bit later, but just know that if it's out there and you can Google it and find it and it's right in front of your face, it's not a big deal. I'll admit the inspiration for this video was that I kept getting messages yelling at me because I was breaking OPSEC by saying that sometimes we paint trucks green and not tan. But when we start getting to the area of things being kind of classified, kind of not classified, that's when things start to get a little bit more interesting. The most common thing that sits in this classified gray area are the specific components or capabilities of vehicles and munitions. Let's take the top speed of an F-35, for example. If you go online and ask your favorite AI engine, or just look it up on Wikipedia yourself, there it is, Mach 1.6. The thing is, though, that's just a reported number. Exact speeds of more modern aircraft like F-22s, F-35s, and the like are actually classified. Those are numbers that would reveal a more direct way to counter these aircraft. It's not going to make it easier to shoot them down necessarily, but it's going to make it easier to avoid them yourself and playing around that kind of speed. The stealth coatings on these aircraft is another good example. Everyone knows that the F-35 has a stealth coating, but the exact composition of it is a secret. You can Google the radar cross-section or how large it shows up on a radar and you'll find a number, but that's not the actual number. It's like when a stripper tells you that her real name is Rachel. Even if you are 5 course banquets in, deep down you know it's probably not actually Rachel. While you can find video footage of the inside layout of an Abrams and exactly how it works in combat, and manuals with nearly 1,000 pages on the intricate details on how the whole thing works on the first page of Google, one thing you're not going to find is the exact composition of the Shabam armor composite that it uses to protect against incoming rounds. Sure, you can research and find that it's a mixture of ceramic tiles, metal plates, and Kevlar layers, but in what combination of what exact materials is itself classified? Knowing that exact combination wouldn't mean that you'd be able to invent a new rocket launcher by leveraging 5G brainwaves and seed oil packets that could start magically deleting American tanks with a single shot, but it could lead you to modifying or adding a new thing to a rocket warhead that would increase your kill chances from, say, 30 to 50%. And that's a huge difference if you spread it across an entire front line. It's probably no surprise after hearing all those examples that we don't actually know how deep or fast modern submarines can operate at. The Navy does put out numbers, but it's widely accepted that these are not the real numbers and that subs go both faster and deeper than what is publicly available information. Submarines have to use every single advantage in order to stay stealthy because otherwise they're giant billion-dollar targets. And if you know the actual depth that one of these can operate at, you could try to force one into a sticky situation with a handful of torpedoes and careful planning. For a large portion of things that are classified, it's really more about protecting vulnerabilities of systems that we have in place. Keeping the stealth coating on a jet secret makes it harder to shoot down. Same goes for the speed of subs and the armor on tanks. But this rule is a little different when you start to look at things like SAM batteries and missile systems. One of the biggest things kept secret in terms of real numbers are the actual ranges on anything missile related. If you don't know exactly, say, how far a ballistic missile can actually fire, you have 2 equally annoying options if you're going to be on the receiving end of it. Admittedly, one might be a little more annoying than the other. You can either A, overestimate it, which means all your strategic resources will be farther away from the front line, logistics takes a lot longer to work and is less reliable, important weapon systems have to be pushed back further away from the units they're supposed to support, aircraft have to be stationed farther away, which reduces response time and range, and the units in that zone of maybe in range, maybe not, have to assume that they are in range and constantly reposition to make sure they don't become sitting ducks to get exploded. Or you could risk underestimating, take a more aggressive approach, and get treated like a real-life game of whack-a-mole. Gray area classification really boils down to keeping us alive a little longer and making sure the bad guys are kept alive a little less longer, or at the very least the time that they are alive is a little harder and less efficient. The vast majority of technology that's classified ultimately comes down to not necessarily having some huge edge on the battlefield, it's having a series of strategic advantages for as long as possible. But what about stuff we basically know nothing about, like the 6th generation NGAD fighter, that the most we really know about it is a rough program outline and that a testbed aircraft took a short flight recently? Or what about the stuff we really don't know about, and then I'm just gonna pick a random picture while I'm editing this to represent it? I probably picked that one crazy picture of my cat Miso. It's a good one. Well, for that actually secret stuff, it's usually kept secret in order to maintain a time advantage. What do I mean by that? Basically, the United States tries to leverage technology overmatch, meaning they want to maintain a full generation of technology ahead of the competition, whether it be a plane, tank, or fitness regime. China and Russia know that the United States is, or at least was, working on a 6th generation fighter. They probably even have some stolen info on it. But if they don't know the specifics, then the US maintains that advantage, at least for a few years, until other nations manage to catch up. It's not so much that we keep these kinds of things secret so that we can spring them against an enemy in World War III, it's just so that we have better stuff for slightly longer. If having a high-tech secret weapons program was enough to win wars, we'd all be speaking German right now. Now that I've lost like 80% of my audience blabbing on about the levels of classification and what they do, now let's talk about why you really wouldn't want to classify things if you absolutely don't have to. Before I get into the first reason, I'm going to steal a scene from Dr. Strangelove.
Is that the whole point of the Doomsday Machine is lost? If you keep it a secret, why didn't you tell the world, eh?
It was to be announced at the party congress on Monday. As you know, the Premier loves surprises.
So let's talk about deterrence. Or the idea of making it so that your enemies don't want to attack you in the first place, because retaliation would be incredibly severe. The idea of having hordes of super weapons kept secret only to spring them in the case of World War III is fucking stupid, to put it frankly. The greatest weapon you can build is one that is so big, scary, and powerful that it makes your enemy not want to even attack you in the first place. Any weapon that isn't scary enough to at least cause an enemy nation to hesitate in attacking you really isn't worth building, and it certainly isn't worth keeping a secret. Nukes are so incredibly horrific in the fact that they will literally end the world as we know it that no one has ever used one in a war since the 2 used in Japan. Aircraft carrier groups influence geopolitical policy because they are a big fat, hey, I'm here with an arsenal of weapons and aircraft that cost more than your entire economy. Missile test results are published by the DoD to say, hey, we have this new thing that if you attack us is going to wipe half of you off the map. These work at deterrence because they are a real incredible threat. Russia can see that we have bombers capable of infiltrating their airspace and firing munitions. China can see that the Marines have the equipment to successfully land and deploy an amphibious force, and that they practice using it. Italy can see that we regularly place pineapple on pizza, so if we're insane enough to do that, don't be surprised at all the other insane stuff we're willing to do. The United States loves deterrence. It's kind of our thing. We fly strategic stealth aircraft over football stadiums, for God's sake. We station tripwire forces all over the world at potential hotspots, openly hold war games targeting China for the hell of it, and then we film all of it and put it out for free on the internet. Where do you think I get all my footage from? I didn't film this. None of that works if something is hidden away. If you keep something super top secret, it also means that soldiers aren't training with it, and ground commanders aren't integrating it into their plans, and you probably aren't testing it enough because it's so secret to see if it actually works. Even if you just hint at something existing, like if rumors were floating around that there was some kind of sci-fi superweapon that makes nukes look like firecrackers, until it's proven to be a credible threat, no one's going to be actually reacting to it. Rumors and podcast conspiracy theories don't drive defense policy. Information does, even if it is imperfect information. That's why we see Russia displaying things like fancy new tank and vehicle designs and stealth aircraft all over the place, even if they are in such small numbers that they can't make a difference in any kind of war. It shows a credible threat that they have something like this and theoretically could build more. Iran takes this a step further by just making things that look real when they're really just wooden frames and not an actual vehicle. North Korea, arguably one of the most secretive nations on Earth, held an entire ceremony for their new attack submarine to show off to the world that they have a new attack submarine. The best weapon is the one you don't have to fire once, not the one you can keep as an ace in the hole that may or may not even work. The other majority reason why you don't want to just keep everything from weapon specifications to how to dig a hole properly locked away in a vault is because there are two big costs to classifying things. Actual costs, like money costs, and efficiency. Let's say I want to build a new type of wheel for the military. It's gonna be sick. It'll have Wi-Fi, laser guns, and a crayon dispenser. But we can't let Uzbekistan know what we're doing because they'll leverage their massive industrial and military might and use the technology against us. We cannot risk it. They are too powerful. The decision is made to make it top secret hush-hush. Building a wheel takes a lot of people to design, fabricate, and test it, and we can't run the risk of one of the hundreds of people working on it accidentally leak information. So how do we ensure that they all keep it a secret? Easy. We just don't tell them what they're working on. The military, when building new classified tech, operates through compartmentalization, meaning no one except a few individuals higher up actually know what they're building. Designer A over in Alabama is designing new screws to attach it to the vehicle. They don't know what they're making a screw for or what's going on or how it's going to be used. All they know is that they're making a screw with a set of given design parameters. Now designer B over in Portland is making the hub of the actual wheel. He doesn't know what the hub is for, just that he's making a hub. After a few months, it's finally time to put the screw into the wheel, but the tolerances were off. Now, Portland guy has to send up a report that climbs up half a dozen people in his chain of command that the tolerances were off. Finally, once it hits a person with clearance to contact the people making the screws, then once again it has to make its way all the way down to the guy who makes the screws to adjust the tolerances. Then the cycle just repeats itself. You've now spent 6 months and hundreds of man hours just to tell some dude that he needs to make the screw 2 millimeters thinner. Oh, and by the way, everyone here is paid massive wages throughout this entire process, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, which, if this was not classified, Hub Guy could have messaged Screw Guy before he went to lunch and had the problem solved before he went back. Now, if you will, consider the fact that the F-35 is made up of 300,000 individual parts, and we only talked about one. Compartmentalization of any information makes it incredibly hard to work on or with anything. It makes everything slow, inefficient, and insanely expensive. In the military, if you have to access top secret information, you have to literally go to a different building in order to do so. But let's say you do manage to get your fancy tricked out wheel up and running and out to the service. Well, it can't be out in the open because then the people would talk about it, so we have to keep it locked away somewhere secret that no one can get to it. Well, now it's just sitting in a warehouse. Wait, what's that? You actually want to train with it? Because if you don't know how to use it, it will be a disaster to deploy with in real life? Okay, fine, but first you have to make sure the hundreds of thousands of troops expected to use it have the appropriate clearances, and that should only take about 1 million years. But now you also have to come up with a special training location in order to use it that's far away from prying eyes and social media, which obviously isn't going to be cheap, and planning that would be a nightmare. And because of all of that, now you can only train with it a few times a year, if that, which is not enough to actually get proficient with said wheel, and also it can't be part of any of our other training exercises. You know, the ones where we do large-scale fights like it would be in real life, because that's not secure enough, you get the idea. Damn Uzbekistan and their prolific spy network. They're just too good at what they do. Top secret superweapons don't make sense. They're not practical, and the military avoids classifying things in the first place if they can avoid it. Are there exceptions to this? Of course there are. We didn't really know about things like the RX-9 variant of the Hellfire missile existed until it was first used. You know, the one that deploys swords out to the side. But this isn't a superweapon. If anything, it's a less powerful version of a weapon we've already had built, but just for a very specific use case. See, the real secrets are both more boring, but also more dangerous than they might realize. The vast majority of things that are secret that the government won't acknowledge that they have are cyber and surveillance related. Things like zero-day exploits on commercial software being the most common of them. The entire federal government spends millions looking for vulnerabilities and weaknesses in commonly used software around the world in order to use it against people. These exploits are then hoarded, kept secret, and used against adversarial countries. Stuxnet, the highly sophisticated cyber weapon that took down an Iranian nuclear refinement facility back in 2010, was a good example of this. But the majority of these are things like gaining access to email encryption keys, pinging location data from cell phone firmware, or other things that would let the government discreetly keep eyes on or gather information. So, when it comes down to it, super secret super weapons, as we think of them at least, don't exist. Are there secret programs? Yes. But they're usually brought to light as soon as possible in order to increase their deterrence factor. Classifying things is expensive and time-consuming, and everyone should really be more afraid of their phones, not a bunch of potential UFOs powered by your local Freemason Lodge wizardry. This video is a little longer than normal, so let me know what you think about that. Thank you for watching, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.